All right, welcome to the speaker panel discussion. So I'm going to run down basically how this is going to work. We have a microphone right over there, and that is where you're going to come and ask your questions. So pretty much it's open forum, ask any question. We're going to have 2 mics up here, and so we can have up to 2 speakers at a time responding or going over a question. So this is pretty much your opportunity to ask our wonderful panel of speakers and luminaries about various DevOps topics or, what their favorite breakfast cereal is. So, all right, come on. Come up to the mic. Come on. You guys need more cold brew because there's some in the back.
Kick it off with a question. Kick it off, Mike. Or Mark.
Excellent. I'm going to give it to you. You are going to ask a question.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Oh, gosh.
Testing.
Okay. Well, since I'm stalling and I have the mic, any fellow Peloton riders on the panel? No? Am I the only Pelotoner in the room? Wow, you guys are missing out. A little bit? Yes. A little bit? Okay. I mean, did I stall long enough? Has someone come up with a better question? Because I can go on about Peloton for a real long time. My team will tell you. So I guess I'll ask the panel a serious question. So what was your kind of thinking back? Who was the greatest kind of influence or inspiration that kind of helped you along your path to success with DevOps or in technology?
Okay, I'll go. I was fortunate enough that in college I had some really good teachers that also acted as advisors and coached me through some professional things and gave me some opportunities. But I guess professionally, several different managers and coworkers along the way have been, I wouldn't say that there's one that's just like the shining star example, but many have helped me get to where I am today, including the stage. So yeah, that's just a lot.
Hello. Oh, it's on. I actually didn't speak this year, but I did speak a couple of years ago. So I'm Ross Clanton at American Airlines. I'll take this from a DevOps angle, actually. I had kind of two early influences that really got me passionate about this, and I feel like I've spent the last 8 or 10 years going after this space. And one was when I was at Target, I was leading enterprise architecture, and our whole IT organization was completely screwed up. It was the classic way overly siloed. And I decided I was getting exposed to DevOps super early, learned about Patrick back then, and John Willis and a lot of these guys. But I kind of raised my hand because I came out of infrastructure, and I said, I'll go back in infrastructure. Let me start this DevOps transformation. And I reached out to one of my friends. I'm like, what do I need to do to get back to speed? I've been out for a while. And he's like, read the Phoenix Project. And so I read it, and I was so inspired by it. I went to Gene Kim. This is probably 2012 or 13. I ran into Gene Kim at Velocity. And I never go up I'm actually an introvert, so I never go up to people and have to talk to them. But I literally pulled my team with me, found Gene Kim sitting at a bar, and I'm like, I just got to talk to you about this book. And I saw myself in every leadership role in the book because I've been in all those roles, and I totally empathized with it, which I've been really well connected with Gene since, and it's kind of changed my career. But there was one other person. We were big in Chef at Target at the time, and I watched Adam Jacobs talk from Velocity 2013, and it just it hit me so hard. I'm like, this is what we got to be doing. So it changed my whole career. Since then, I've been all about DevOps. I've been all about transformation. Decided to make that my career. So I've done it at Target, Verizon, now at American Airlines. And yeah, it was a lot of inspiration back then.
So for me, I'm going to take it from a DevSecOps perspective. So when I was in college, I started a cybersecurity club, and me and this guy, I'm pretty sure if he was here, he'd probably be in the seats right now laughing. But he walked up to me one time, and he was just like, I wanted to be a video game developer originally, but then I realized that video game developers back then didn't really get paid very well. And not only that, but they also overworked them, and I didn't want to be sleeping underneath a cot in trying to develop the next GTA, right? So he walked up to me, he was just like, hey, you want to learn how to hack printers? And I was just like, isn't that illegal? And we ended up hacking printers at the university, and one of the professors ended up having to turn the printer off because it said some very explicit things that we weren't supposed to say. But the thing that really interests me was I found the passion for cybersecurity at that point, because I was just like, well, I'm pretty sure if we can hack into these things, there's probably ways that we can defend it, right? And at the time, I was also really good at being a developer, and I wanted to stay a developer. So I was just like, is there a way for me to marry the two? And hence, I ended up getting an internship at Verizon, and they had this thing called DevSecOps. And I was just like, once I got exposed to it, I was, managing containers and orchestrating them. And there was one project that we did where we integrated all the security tools into Jenkins pipeline. And I just found love after that, because I was like, you know what, I can build and I can secure at the same time. So that's pretty much how it happened. So if you're a video game developer and you're here, come talk to me.
Got a question for the crowd.
Yeah, this is directed mostly towards you, Damien, actually. So I appreciated very much in your talk how you'd, one of the things I took away from it mostly was just inspiration that you got to know a little bit of the AWS services or knew some of them and then just decided to pull them all together. And we're pretty early in our transition to using cloud technology. I've gone through enough of the stuff to learn like the cloud practitioner so that I recognize a name. Oh, Macie, I think I kind of remember what that is. And so I just wanted to let you know it's quite inspirational to see how you took pieces I'd heard of and cobbled them together in a way that made sense and made something cool out of it. So I'm curious, are those all things, those particular technologies you used, the services, are those ones that you were familiar with before, or how much of that was just playground, like trying something out?
Well, I would say everything, like the majority of the services like Lambda, EventBridge, SNS, I was familiar with them, but I was not familiar with Macie at all. And at the end of the day, in order for me to be able to integrate all of them, it's a new experience every time, because no project is the same when you're working with AWS. The service may be the same, you may call it the same API, but you may have to work with it a little differently to get the result that you need. Yeah. So it was still a learning experience and a learning curve, because Macie is, there's a lot to it, I would say. So yeah, okay. But thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jihao. I'm from Wayfair. My question to the speakers or to the panel is, in this DevSecOps world, or in this DevSecOps ecosystem that you are exposed to, what are the gaps that you are working on today, and what is your strategy towards kind of addressing them?
So you ask about the parts that are currently missing or that we need to still address in the DevSecOps space. One of my pet peeves is sometimes rethinking mantras. There's the mantra shift left, put everything in the hands of the developer. And I'm like, we fought so hard about having dev and ops on an equal page, and now you're making the developers kingmakers again, and you're saying they will solve all the security problems. So I started saying, like, every time you say shift left, I say also shift right, because you can't predict everything in your clean room dev environment. There's the shitty stuff that happens in reality in production. So that's definitely one of the things I would try to address in the industry again, that narrative that has shifted so badly into developers, that there's so many other pieces to solve security, whether that's a UI problem, whether it's something in the operational, something in the hardware, and you can't just predict everything. You know, that's a pipe dream. So anyway, that's something I would change in that field if I could.
It's funny you mentioned a clean room. I wrote a blog that said maybe my mom wasn't right. Sorry, Mom. That I shouldn't have to clean my room all the time, because running against the clean room, it's important to be able to get the idea of, can this thing work in this environment? But also working with a messy room, right? An environment that maybe has been running for an extended period of time, has had multiple different hands in it. Not necessarily that it's going to look like a production environment, but it's also not going to look like a clean room. That can be good from testing and evaluation purposes as well.
A little bit. And maybe this is building off of what Patrick said, but figuring out culturally how to get like everyone in the organization to care about security. And I've worked in 3 very different enterprise cultures, and a couple of them got it better than others, but it's hard. Like, and it isn't just the developers. It isn't just a central security team. Like, everyone needs to care. Somehow security has to be part of the culture. We woke up at Target when I was there because it was not part of the culture, and then we had the biggest breach in history at that point in time, and it quickly became part of the culture after that. But it took something that big at that kind of scale for us to wake up and start to take it really seriously.
And I would also like to add to that. I think the big thing with DevSecOps that I've noticed in my career, a lot of people, security culture, it's hard to integrate, and it also takes time to integrate it. If we want to push things onto developers, we also have to understand that developers need time to fix the issues. And management isn't really, well, I'm not going to say all management, but usually the case is management is trying to push those features down, and there's a timeline. And if you don't make that time to fix those security issues, then you really have that's the culprit of the problem, in addition to the lack of security processes and pipelines today. They're still relatively new, and these organizations are making it easier to add connectors into them, but they're still, in a developmental phase in certain aspects. So.
My voice is shaky. It's just because it's so cold in here. I've got 2 questions, but the first one is really, really quick. I think it's for Michael, actually. This will affect every presentation I do now, but what font was that in your presentation? Because I Googled for it last night and I couldn't find it.
I think that's called IBM Perfect DOS 5270 or something like that. I looked up the fonts that are used on the IBM XT, which was the first computer I used since my dad worked at IBM. And I think that's the one that was closest that was free. The problem with that one is the non-characters like quotes and apostrophes. I don't know what the deal is, but they don't work. So you have to go highlight that and change it to Arial.
Oh, gotcha.
Or whatever you like.
Thanks for the heads up. I will try to remember that one. The second one is, I guess, what did you have to say no to? Like, a lot of you are people I'm like, wow, I'd love to be you one day, right? But you're going to have to say no to something along the way, and that could be, sometimes it's tech, sometimes it's a job or projects, or sometimes it's your family in some regard. And I'm just curious, what you had to just turn down to get to where you are.
Well, since I have the mic, I'll answer first. Yeah, I mean, I guess the most, it's not uncomfortable, but depressing answer is, I've traveled a lot for my job since 2005, and I have 3 kids now. I'll work backwards. I shouldn't actually say their ages because I forget them every now and then. But I have like a 10, 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old. And aside from a 2-year stint in that time span, and of course the last crazy pandemic stuff, I travel a lot. So, for example, not because of this conference, but the one I'm going to next week, I'm missing the first day of school for my kids. So yeah, I've said no sounds like I'm kind of a jerk, but I've said no to a lot of family stuff in the service of where I am today.
Yeah, so I've said no to job interviews. I'm fortunate enough to have that luxury. Not everyone has that luxury to be able to say that. If it was too risky for my personal risk profile, I'll take lots of risks at work with technology. Let's try this, let's try that. Yep, we're going to fail, we're going to iterate and go. In my personal life, I like stability. So there's a certain profile of companies I like to work for, certain types of jobs I like to work for. So I've said no to that. I've said no to some opportunities like these when they get in the way of other commitments I've made, either with family or work. And then sometimes I say no to sleep. I don't sleep as well or as much as I should because there are things I want and need to do, or at least I feel that there are. And I balance it as best I can.
So I think for me, it's not so much about saying no, it's about saying not right now. And I think one of the things that I struggled with for a long time was trying to do it all at once, and that mentality that like, oh, I have to do everything. And I remember having a conversation with one of my mentors at the time, and she's like, you can have it all, just not all at the same time. And that was something that really resonated with me. And so one of the strategies that I've always used is identifying what my priorities are at a point in time. And they can change, right? They can change from a morning to an afternoon or day by day. But then understanding what my priorities are, so when I'm saying no, I understand that I'm saying no to protect my yeses, or what I really want to prioritize. And so I think it's more being clear on what is most important to you. And sometimes it's family, right? And I've had to say no, like I can't take this job opportunity because right now, like my kiddo is going through a phase and it's just not the right time for me, and being okay and comfortable with that. So that's how I've approached it.
There's definitely been a lot of things I've said no to, and I think prioritization has made it easier. And for me, it's been like aligning what my values are and being able to see those, and then also like what are my goals for the next year, for the next 5 years, so I can kind of start building that roadmap. And for things that I've said no to, like one of it was just like my values are of the way that I look for the workplaces that I look at. Like, don't want to be at a place that discriminates against minorities, not toxic cultures. So being able to walk away from organizations when I see them get there. Then it could be things like, oh, I actually really got to prioritize my mental health. Like, I'm not sleeping well, I'm running really anxious, I'm like not taking care of my basic needs. I had to tell KubeCon like 3 days before I had to go speak, like I actually have to cancel all my travel. Like, I'm in a very severe depressive episode. Like, yes, I can go on there, see the community, get another talk on YouTube, but that's not worth it when I think about my goals in the long run. And then we can think something more immediate, just like projects. Like, I love working on open source. I love being able to try new tools and try to put things together, but it comes to the point that you're just like, this is not feasible for the 5 hours that I have of work this week that I could do. So being able to just be like, how can I be the most effective with the little time that I have so that I actually learn something and I can possibly make an impact?
Yeah, mine's probably similar to Kote's. I spent the first 15, 20 years of my career focusing on my career. And at some point I had 3 kids in that process, and I wasn't focused on family. And so I think I said no to family quite a bit. And then I kind of had a wake-up call about 4 or 5 years ago when my now 14-year-old was probably 9 or 10. I've got a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 3-year-old now. And I'm like, what am I doing? And so I kind of did a 180, and I left the company I was at. I took a sabbatical for about 9 months. I spent all that time with my family, traveled everywhere, tried to like buy back some time with them a little bit, and then decided from that point forward that's not how I was going to operate. And so I learned what types of cultures I didn't want to work in and what types of environments. By the way, that's how I found American Airlines. It's the most family-first culture I've ever worked in, and that plus flight benefits, come talk to me. It's a great place to work, and I don't feel guilty being in a very senior leadership role. Like I I do hockey tournaments with my son a couple weekends a month, and I'll work from a hotel room when I can, and I'll go watch games when I can, and I don't have any guilt like I did before in other roles. So yeah, that was a big thing. And since then, and when I went through that switch like 4 or 5 years ago, I started saying no to a lot of companies that wanted to hire me, especially in that sabbatical time, because that's what I was looking for. Like, are they gonna try to force me back into that mode, or am I gonna be able to be successful here and be family first?
I think I would answer that question with saying, or talking about speaking at DevOps Days. This is my 7th year of going to DevOps Days. I guess you should subtract a few for the pandemic, but that are virtual. Do those count really? I don't know. But with them, saying no to myself, the first 3 years I was at a DevOps Days, I learned a lot, soaked it up, but I didn't speak. And so I would encourage those of you here, don't say no to yourself. Each of you has a unique perspective and a voice to share to our community, and we depend on folks that are sitting in the audience to not say no to yourself and to come up and speak and be a participant in the community. So I would say, I did say no to myself, but don't do that. Don't make the mistake. Please share with us. We'd love to hear it.
So that was a excellent topic to kind of share some very personal things about, how to integrate work and culture, and and family life. So that was very cool. Let me change things. We got a question? All right, let's do it.
Okay, cool. Now it's on. Yeah, I've been drafted for a question. One of the things that I'm kind of worried about is, so I really focus on continuous delivery. I know it really makes developers' lives better, but I also know that many organizations are facing a situation where they implement continuous delivery, they get everybody excited. There's a core group of people that kick it off that really focus on the quality that's supposed to be there, and then it expands and the quality kind of fades. Other teams start having major incidents, brakes get slammed on, we go back to legacy change process, literally seeing companies ban continuous delivery. And I'm curious if any of you have seen that, or what steps you've taken in your organizations to make sure that there's some buffer there to prevent that sort of situation from happening.
How long y'all got? Yeah, so I'm the QA guy, the QE guy. I see this a lot. A lot of things have to do with unrealistic expectations of what test automation can do. And even if you have reasonable expectations of what it can do, we don't always have the understanding of what it's going to take to get there. That much of it is programming and has to be treated like software. You have to have code bases, and you have to reviews, and you're going to have to morph. Because when was the last time you released the same product, exact same lines of code, twice? Probably never, right? You added something, you took something out, you fixed something. You probably need to adjust your automation by adding something, changing it so you're maintaining parity with your product. Otherwise, your quality is going to rot because your automation is going to rot. You're going to quit trusting it. And if you want to do things like continuous delivery, commit to production, you need to have an idea of what your cost of failure is, what your cost of change is. If either of them is intolerably high, you may want some human eyes on that before it goes out the door. So there can be a blend of the continuous delivery and continuous deployment, but also have some human interaction there. It doesn't have to necessarily be just strong change control or just shove it out the door as soon as it passes the smoke testing suite. So it's all about being responsible and understanding what your ecosystem is, what your tolerances are, what your value propositions are, and going with that and layering it right into your corporate goals, whatever they are.
I wanted to add to that. There's a reason sometimes you fall back into kind of like previous habits, and sometimes they're bad habits. But sometimes I also feel like when certain pain goes away on a threshold, that you're okay with going back to the old situation. And for example, in security, there's something that says, we're all talking about like security and we need to do more security, but there's a paradox is the more, like in the beginning you have the pain, like, oh, all these repos are not secure, we're gonna fix that. And after a while you're like, oh, well, we got this kind of covered and it's all good. And we start caring less about security again because we're comfortable at that level. And so we're fading back to the old situations. Same thing in, let's say you're a SaaS company, you start out like every customer is important for us. Guess what? After a couple of years when you're successful, you only care about the big ones who pay your bill and all the rest is kind of noise. So there's this paradox about like how you started initially, then when you're up to a level that your comfort like comes back at you. And that might be in quality as well, that, if everything goes smoothly, why should we invest in the testing? We got this covered. And this kind of whole paradox of equilibrium or something that we're facing. And I don't know how to solve it, so but it's an observation in the industry that like we're doing to ourselves, like, oh, we all want to get more autonomous. And then once we're autonomous, like, oh, we should collaborate more, get more central things. I don't know, it's like a pendulum swing on, like central, decentral, we keep going.
And I'm not sure if it's something we can solve, because I don't think it needs to be solved. I think it's one of those things where we need to be aware of it and adjust and morph as things become outside of whatever tolerances we have. So maybe it's solved momentarily or, a year or whatever, until something significant changes enough that the paradigm needs to shift and we reevaluate and pivot.
Yeah. Maybe add to that is that a lot of people, they start off with the idea, oh, deployment is a bottleneck, and they keep investing in the deployment and make that faster. But like the metaphor is more about when you have a barrel of water and you have the sides, and like one of the sides is an aspect, and it's flowing through one of those aspects because the side is very low. That's the one that you need addressing. And like building a wall on all the other sides of the barrel, like it doesn't give you any value. And kind of keep your eye on the ball if you're like optimizing like your deployment. Maybe your problem is actually in your hiring process, like that you never considered, or maybe in something else, the way you run the meetings instead of like the pipeline. And like keep your eye on the ball, like whatever effort you're doing, and don't kind of go over that. And maybe that's like enough is enough, like the just enough mantra is very important to that.
I also think too that having a culture that you've built around like what goal or what problem are we solving. I've seen a lot of times, for instance, saying, hey, we have continuous deployment, but we deploy things we can't stop, right? Well, hey, if we do, let's focus on building like a good tool of, can we roll back? Can we detect that? Something like a flagger or something like that, right? Where you can roll back off of that, kind of maturing the capability that will solve like the people who are going to come up and say, well, why we can't do this because of X. Okay, well, might be a tool for that, but also I would say talk with leadership and people who are the culture holders and be like, this is something that's aligning to our business goals of shipping things faster. We need to do this. Like, what's holding us back, and then finding a plan to solve it. So that's why I would say it'd be a culture thing as well as maybe a tooling thing too.
So, as all of you are big thinkers, people who are involved in getting things done, doing things, etc., I imagine that there's always something on your mind. What's that one thing that's keeping you up at night lately as you think about the future, as you think about your problems, your challenges, etc.? Maybe you could share some of those challenges, those thoughts, those problems that you're wrestling with.
Well, it doesn't keep me up, but it's one thing after, I guess, 13 years of DevOps is the solutions we took so long to build and kind of the procedures that we used, will they still be relevant in the future? And I'm talking about we kind of moved from a situation where dev and ops was not talking, and it's very separated. Now in companies, this is more, considered as a joint thing. We didn't have autonomous teams before. Now we have. So the collaboration in companies is changing, but are the solutions we made to fix the old situation, will they be useful in the new situation again? And I'm not sure what that is, but it's kind of, if someone said, oh, we've done that like 10 years ago, right? Yeah, but the situation in your company is completely different, and we have cloud right now, we didn't have that before, and anyway, that's something that is trickling my mind, if you ask.
When I spoke here a few years ago, my talk was on enterprise. It was leadership lessons learned, basically, and I told these stories of major failures. Some of them were my own experiences, some were from some of my peers, but and it all boiled down to lack of leadership support and leadership alignment, and or maybe a C-level executive changes or things happen in the environment that kind of undermine the transformation. And I have a knack for getting into these roles where I get to go sit in the middle and try to navigate all this alignment with senior executives all the time. And sometimes I'm like, why do I keep doing this to myself? But I really do enjoy it for some reason. I could add more chapters to that story, and that keeps me up at night. It keeps me up at night at American. Every company I've worked at, the culture is different, but the problems are the same. And how you solve the problems have to be a little different because of the different culture. And for me, it's how do I make sure we've got the right alignment, and how are we creating the right level of support at the top, and how do we make sure that the teams are feeling that so that they feel empowered to move in the right direction. That's a continuous challenge, I would say, in every place that I've ever worked.
Well, I assume this is mostly about professional life. But in my personal life, I really got to learn Dutch if I want to keep living in the Netherlands, which is a thrilling adventure. But that kind of relates to one of the two things I would say that in a professional realm that I think about. And one of them is the problem with learning Dutch is the learning part. I can't just wake up and be fluent, or not even fluent, be able to speak it. And that's what we talk about a lot in this community is the need to learn things. And I don't know, learning kind of sucks. It's really hard, and it's not rewarding for a while, and it's different than what you're currently doing, and you just want to get on with your life. Whether I'm learning Dutch or I don't know if I've learned something new professionally in a long time, to my point. And so that the problem with that is what if this is I guess an old movie reference, but what if this is as good as it gets? We're kind of not going to get better. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's the charts that I had, they're all kind of flat. And so I always wonder and then based on the people I go talk with at large organizations, I don't know, we're probably at the apex of awesomeness, and maybe that's fine, or not. And then the second thing, which is, I don't know, a little less fuzzy, is, I look at the quarterly revenues, in as a topic in the podcast I do with some friends, and those public cloud companies make a lot of money. And so people are using them, and I keep wondering what's the deal with just private cloud? If all the money's going over there, when are we not going to need this private cloud thing? And what does that mean, especially for all of the people here, right? That's a huge shift. On the other hand, people have been worrying about that for almost 20 years. Is that right? So who knows? But, maybe one day it'll just evaporate, the data centers, and then that'll be distressing. Because it's change. Change is what I worry about, I guess, is what I'm saying.
So the answer could have been one word?
That's right.
Just kidding. It was great.
Exactly. This is why you always need an editor to help you out, which is great.
I guess for me is very much on the space, been working on DevOps tooling, whether it was internal tools or building SaaS companies for this space, where it almost, specifically working in the realm of reliability, it's one, not enough tools, two, too many tools, these tools all need data in between one another. So it's kind of like ends up going back, and this is why I stay up at night. It ends up being back and forth where like with all these abstraction layers, we already know we're running such complex systems. The abstraction is only making it have like a layer of butter that now things like seem a little fuzzy, or we can't really break through the oil, the butter to kind of go see all the information we need to know. But at the same time, like when we think about moving the industry forward, like wouldn't it be easier if we actually had access to that data? So to like the point with like continuous deployment, like having a lot more of those gates or having a lot more metric that actually allowed for you to know like how much error are you actually adding on to your PR that's going in through the CI/CD in a form that's like, how is this actually going to affect the customers and the users? So I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways that we can solve this. And like in an ideal world, I just see it as like, yeah, there should just be one company that helps us push forward reliability. But there's some companies trying to do that. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense either. And every single company is going to have their own things. And I don't have an answer for it. I think it's more of an open space discussion. But I feel like if folks have thoughts, I'm always happy to hear them. But that's something that I keep looking at as like, I keep working with community and customers of like, we want to do the work, but there's no integrations, or like doing all these HTTP calls to figure out what the actual metrics between these layers of our development cycle or in our ops cycle or DevOps itself is really siloed.
For me, I would say it's probably the amount of tools that we probably need from a DevSecOps perspective. I know there's quite a bit now, but for me, when developing like security frameworks for a specific cloud provider, I know there's like, the AWS keeps growing and they keep adding more services like day in and day out. And I don't think people understand that attackers love having pivot points. And if you don't have controls built in place for it, then you don't necessarily know how to properly secure your environment. So that's something that keeps me up a little late at night. I'm not going to say late at night because I like to get my sleep. And guess what? If the company gets hacked, then I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. You know, there's only so much that you can do to prevent that from happening, because if the hacker wants to get in, they're going to get in anyway. They're going to find a way. So that's just something that I look at, and I think as we continue to move forward, it would be nice that, especially from these cloud providers' perspective, they provide like, you know, some services that can help secure their platforms, and it'll be like a one-size-click. You know, just a click of a button, and it's just like, okay, you know, you can do this, 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 instead of having to define your own path to be able to do all of that. Because in certain situations, every organization is pretty different, but there should be some type of like de facto standard, and as far as like how you should be able to secure your environment the way you should. So, yeah, that's it.
So I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but it's something that tickles my brain, sometimes the back, sometimes the front. And it's kind of an amalgamation of all the, what was that funny? of what a lot of the other people have said here. But it's in testing for the last at least 20 years, probably more. On average, we're trying to solve the same problems over and over and over. As a consultant, it's great. I go, I look and see how things are going, and say, okay, here's some things you can do. And it's always a little different. The technologies are different. The ecosystems are different. But it's basically the same types of problems regarding expectations and an understanding of what you can and can't do with your technology, with testing tools, and with testing in general. And I'd like to hope that we get to solving some more interesting testing problems and interesting quality problems than just the basic blocking and tackling and bread and butter of, okay, let's build a smoke test suite. And now what are we going to do with our regression testing? Handling things. There's a concept out there called high volume automated testing that's really, really interesting to me. And it's not performance or load testing. It's a different thing. And we'll get in some of those nooks and crannies that we don't normally get to with traditional test case-based testing. And I touched on it a little bit in my talk, but I wish we could get to the point where that was a bigger focus, because we really had gotten past some of the initial sort of, I don't know, basic heavy, light lifting to get to some of the heavy lifting.
All right. We wanted to thank our panel today for an amazing discussion. Thank you guys so very much.